Ava caught the edge of fabric and the flash of metal before the man at the pediatric doorway could pull away. Suspicion tightened her steps. Someone had slipped a folded hospital bracelet and a small envelope into his cardigan pocket, and that action did not belong on her late night round. She reached the doorway with the cart between her palms and saw the man's fingers close over the paper, his shoulders slumping as if relief had poured into them. The corridor hummed with fluorescent lights and the low beeps of distant monitors. Ava kept her voice low and direct. "Sir, you can't be taking patient items out here." Ava, naming the rule as she approached. Her voice was measured. She pressed her palm to the cart and let the cart's warmth steady her. The man turned. He looked older than most visitors, a cardigan hanging over a hospital gown, and his eyes landed on her with something that was not fear so much as a tired calculation. "Who is that bracelet for?" she asked. He opened his mouth, closed it, then folded his hands over the envelope. "It's not what it looks like," he said, "please." "Not here." His tone was low. Ava knew the rules. She also knew how a child's tag could change a life. She kept the question short, the motion direct. "I need a name." External stakes sat there. An unmarked patient, an unauthorized transfer, the hospital's chain of custody. Her training told her to call security. Her chest reacted first, suspicion edged into a taut curiosity. Then a sharper caution when she noticed the man's cardigan sleeve, brushing a simple silver band on his right hand. Ava had pulled night shifts for 10 years. At 32, she moved through the hospital with practiced steps. Check the IV pump, whisper a temperature reading to a chart, tuck a blanket under a sleeping child's chin. She carried a worn wristwatch, a silver locket at her throat, and a habit of smoothing the sheets as if order could quiet everything. On her break, she breathed chamomile, scented tea, and read the staff emails on her phone. Tonight felt different because the thing in motion did not fit hospital routines. The man at the doorway had the bearing of someone carrying a choice. That made Ava step in. The man pushed a hand into his cardigan and produced a hospital bracelet folded in quarter, the white plastic catching the light. He pressed the bracelet into the envelope with a thumb and then looked at Ava. "My name is Marcus Hale," he said. "I have rights." He spoke his name like a fact and set the envelope down on the rail. Ava kept her hands where she could see them. "Marcus Hale, do you have visiting hours documented?" she asked. She pointed at the bracelet briefly. Her voice carried the professional cadence she used with tearful parents and panicked interns. "Do you have permission to touch patients' items?" Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. "No, I couldn't." He stopped. He did not finish. Ava felt doubt shift beneath suspicion. Curiosity pushed her forward. She had to know why a man in a cardigan had a child's bracelet folded into an envelope at 3 a.m. Before she could call for the night supervisor, a woman in a gray cardigan rounded the corner with a clipboard. Night supervisor Rosa scanned the doorway and then Ava's face. "Ava, everything okay?" Rosa's voice had the practical bluntness of someone who kept the night running. She did not wait for small talk. Her eyes hovered on the envelope and the man. Ava answered quickly. A visitor slipped a bracelet into his cardigan. "No sign in." She pointed discreetly. "I thought it was odd." Rosa took the envelope, read the folded edge for a fraction of a second, and closed her mouth into a line. "We can't have unlabeled transfers near pediatrics," she said. "You did the right thing finding him." "Marcus," she said the name like a register entry. "We'll need the visitor sheet and id." Marcus's hands tightened. He moved back toward the hallway and tried to pull his cardigan closed as if shielding the envelope. Rosa stepped in front of him and said, "Please." "We'll handle this." Ava watched Marcus's jaw work. She did not speak again. Her attention dropped to a small detail. The worn leather bracelet at his wrist. It's not frayed. This man carried objects like talismans. That fact pushed Ava from professional caution into personal resolve. She would find out the truth. After Rosa walked away with the envelope, Ava did not return to the med supply cart. She went to the records room and found orderly Sam leaning over a stack of redacted files. Sam kept his hair cropped and his posture practical. He had a habit of whistling under his breath when bored. "Sam, Ava, pull the last admission to the pediatric wing. Unmarked cases this week." She kept her words short and precise. Sam looked up, folded his hands on the table and said, "Why?" He knew which doors his questions opened. Rosa flagged something. Maybe. Or a man named Marcus with an envelope. Ava reached for the stapled file labeled redacted. She did not use the computer. She leaned into the physical act of turning pages, check for a name linked to a similar bracelet pattern. Her voice was low. The search felt like an unauthorized act. Ava knew the boundary. Sam slid a file across. They found a line in a redacted admission from 3 years prior, a name that Ava recognized the instant she saw it. It was the same surname as someone she had lost. Her breath shortened. Doubt shifted into a cold, rising fear. The discovery aligned the anonymous man with an old wound Ava had kept folded away. She did not let the memory run. She read the typed incident instead, a child's name, a date, a notation about a withheld parent identity. The paper smelled faintly of copier, toner, and disinfectant. Ava pushed the folder closer to the lamp. Sam watched her face. "You okay, Ava?" he asked. Ava touched her locket as if to steady a pulse. "This name, it's linked to my file." Sam's whistle stopped. "You sure?" She nodded. "That's why I had to look." They moved down the corridor with the file between them. The hospital woke in small increments. A light on in a ward, a nurse passing a tray. Marcus stepped out of a shadow near the records office and saw them. He did not hide. He leaned against the wall and kept his gaze steady. Ava's suspicion hardened into a need for an explanation that extended beyond policy. She wanted to know what Marcus had done, and whether his choice now would open old doors for her. Marcus's voice was a measured thing when he spoke. "Ava Morales," he said. Her name like he had learned it. "You shouldn't have pulled that out." Ava kept her hands on the folder. "Marcus, who are you protecting?" Her tone went tight. "Who is in that envelope?" Marcus looked at the file, then at Sam, then back at Ava. He folded and unfolded his fingers. "I did it once," he said. "I made a choice. I hid consequences to protect someone." Ava's face went still. Her muscles bunched. She had not expected that admission to sound like a confession. Her mind moved through a list of possible reasons people covered for others: fear, love, guilt. The admission converted professional suspicion into something personal, and Ava felt an old ache calibrate around it. She stepped closer. "Marcus, name?" she said. He lowered his eyes. "I can't give you the name." "Not yet." He looked at her with a vulnerability that cut across his posture. "If you know the name already, you understand why I didn't want it public." Ava pressed a thumb into the corner of the paper. The lamp made the page look brighter than it should at dawn. She felt an internal shift. Curiosity moved into protective instinct for the patient. Protective instinct splintered into a secret empathy for the man who had carried the bracelet. Emotion moved in her throat and in the way she folded her jaw. She did not say the name. Instead, she asked, "Why did you slip the bracelet into your cardigan?" Marcus inhaled and let the air out in a single slow exhale. "Because I promised to keep them from remembering certain things," he said. "Because remembering would hurt more than forgetting." Their exchange did not have the language of romance, but Ava noted the tone. Marcus's voice carried a quiet intensity that made her notice details: how his fingers trembled slightly when he spoke, how his gaze settled on her wristwatch. That small attention became a gentle hook. She felt an odd pull to hold him accountable and to understand his burden. They did not have time to untangle the thread. Dra. Patel came running down the main hallway with a stack of charts in his arms, his lab coat flapping. "Someone tampered with the pediatric charts," he said, voice clipped. He did not stop at politeness. His eyes searched faces until he fixed on Marcus. "Marcus Hale, Jutta Patel, you were seen near an unmarked transfer. Where did you get that bracelet?" Marcus straightened. "I found it near a side door," he said. "I took it because I thought—" "Because you thought what?" Dra. Patel cut in. He unfurled a chart and slammed it on the nurse station counter. The action produced more noise than the words because it belonged to a patient. "Because you wanted to hide identity." He lifted the chart and pointed at a printed line. "This document shows tampering." His finger hammered the paper. Ava watched the staff around them go still. Night Supervisor Rosa stepped forward and called for security into her radio. Sam went pale. Marcus's face clenched. Ava felt the tension climb. This was the peak the corridor had been moving toward. The accusation turned a hushed exchange into a public confrontation. Marcus's voice dropped, close to a whisper. "I did tamper with records." He looked at Jutta Patel, then at Ava. "I covered a name once to protect someone. I thought I was saving them from more hurt. I was wrong." "Wrong how?" Jutta Patel demanded. "Marcus, why hide a patient's identity?" A rapid volley of lines followed, 3 quick exchanges that snapped between them like a staccato. You put a child at risk. Due to Patel, I didn't put a child at risk, Marcus started. Then explain it now! Due to Patel demanded, I tried to keep them safe. Marcus, safe from what? Rosa, from shame. Marcus, from a family truth that would have destroyed a child more than the illness did. The staff gathered into a ring around the nurse station. A woman with a clipboard leaned in. Someone checked the monitor for the pediatric side's assignments. Voices rose and fell. Ava felt the center of the confrontation tighten into a physical reality. A chart slammed on the desk, a radio sputtering, a phone lit with an incoming call. She did not let the conflict turn into noise. She moved to Marcus and said, Marcus, tell me the truth here. Now he swallowed. Years ago, I chose to hide the identity of a parent involved in a case. I warned them to leave town. The bracelet today, it's for that child. I brought it back because I couldn't keep living with the lie. His words landed like small stones. Ava felt a sudden shift from fear to something harsher. Anger at him for deciding alone and an understanding that his secret had real effects on people. Drah. Patel read the lines and pushed his glasses higher. Marcus, you will be reported. You broke protocol. Marcus nodded as if the statement were expected. He did not fight the consequence. He looked at Ava. I wanted you to know before everything else fell apart. He said, I wanted. Ava's breathing quickened. She could call security. She could hand over the file and walk away. Instead, she saw how thin the alternatives were. The patient on the other side of that bracelet had no voice in this hallway. Marcus's action had been reckless, but it had grown out of a motive Ava glimpsed in his hands and in the way he held the envelope to his chest. Her reaction shifted again, from anger to a cautious protection. That was the second major emotion shift of the night, suspicion to fear to a protective complicity. Ava pulled Marcus aside when the staff's attention dialed down for a moment. They slipped into the dim utility closet near the ward, the door clicking closed. Marcus let out a long breath and leaned his head against the metal shelving. I thought hiding the truth would stop people from being broken by it, he said. I didn't see the harm until later. Ava folded her arms, pressed her thumb to the file corner, and counted off the reasons she should follow policy. Duty, reporting, patient safety. Her chest kept a steadying rhythm. Marcus, you can't decide for others, she said. You changed records and you touched patient items. That puts kids at risk. He blinked, and a small involuntary exhale escaped him. I know, he said. I know. The closet smelled of bleach and rubber. Ava straightened. She felt the pull of 2 obligations, the hospital's rules and the immediate child's welfare. She slid the paper into her cardigan and closed the folder. Her hands were not shaking much, but her fingers found the edge of the file with a careful deliberation. She made a tactical, concrete choice. For now she would keep the redacted page in her pocket. She did not say why. Marcus watched her with a look that mixed relief and guilt. Ava, you can't keep this hidden forever. Marcus. She looked at him. Her voice was low, composed. I know the consequences, Marcus. For now, I'll watch the patient. If I see harm, I report you. But I won't make a move that ends whatever fragile care they have without knowing the whole story. She folded the paper and slid it further into her cardigan. The act was a decision. He nodded. Thank you, he said. The word left him small and plain. They stepped back into the corridor where early sun threaded through a window and brightened the tiles. Rosa returned with a radio, her face set, and Sam walked by holding a cup of coffee. The staff returned to routine with the slow grind of dawn duties. Ava moved down the corridor, holding herself like someone with a document folded into their chest. She watched Marcus stand by a bench, adjust his cardigan, and check the pocket as if making sure the envelope was still there. Ava did not report him that morning. She kept the redacted page in her cardigan and walked rounds with a new attention. She checked monitors, asked parents about feeding times, smoothed a blanket on a child without naming the child's file. The choice weighed in her steps. She had resolved the chapter's immediate conflict, a public accusation, a confession, and a private pact. But the consequences had already shifted how she saw Marcus and how she saw her own work. Before the shift change, orderly Sam stopped her at the supply closet and said, Ava, if you need backup, tell me. If there's a safety issue, she looked at him and nodded once. I'll tell you. Thank you, Sam. Her reply was small but specific. Sam's choices had altered the outcome by pulling the file. His actions mattered at the nurse station. Patel finished filing an incident report and did not hide his displeasure. He caught Ava's gaze briefly and said, "Document what you can, Ava." His line was a professional command, but it also held an invitation to be honest. Ava noted the weight of his instruction and folded it into her plan. The chapter closed not with a general reflection but with a concrete beat. Marcus walked to the corridor window, set the envelope on the bench beside him, and then walked back to Ava with a small, stiff voice. "Promise me you'll look after them," he said. "Promise me you won't let the hospital throw them away for what I did." Ava met his eyes. She folded the bracelet's redacted page further into her palm and said, "Marcus, I promise to watch the patient. I won't let paperwork kill care. But if the child is harmed, I will act." She used the word act like a tool. Her decision was not a pledge of loyalty to him. It was a professional boundary wrapped in a human choice. Marcus placed his hand over hers for a brief, transitory second. The contact was simple. Fingers meeting and then letting go. It registered in Ava as a warm pressure on her palm and nothing more, but it altered the color of the morning for both of them. She stepped away, pushed the cart forward, and called out the next set of vital signs. Outside the pediatric wing, the sun climbed higher and sharpened the edges of things. Ava kept the file folded in her cardigan and moved through the ward with deliberate attention. The secret had been exposed and then contained. The chapter's conflict had resolved into a fragile pact and a clear, concrete consequence. She would watch, he would face reporting later, and the child's welfare would come first. The corridor door clicked shut behind her as a nurse entered the room with a tray. And Ava's last motion in the chapter was to tuck the redacted paper deeper into a pocket and walk toward the patient's bed, ready to act on the first sign of harm. Ava slid her hand under the thin hospital pillow and felt the cold bend of metal before Marcus could straighten his cardigan. Suspicion flared through her and she kept her fingers pressed to the bracelet as she pulled it free. Her voice came out sharp and not quite steady as she said, "Marcus, what is this?" He blinked, hand going to his chest, and the room contracted around the moment. Suspicion drove Ava forward. She stepped closer and squared her shoulders, because her duty meant she could not walk away from something that didn't belong in a patient's bed. Ava put the bracelet on the palm of her hand and saw the faded sticker with a child's name half smudged, then reached for the small envelope folded under it. Marcus's eyes narrowed before he could speak. "Ava, who put this here, Marcus?" Marcus did not answer at once. He folded his hands in his lap and looked at the floor, and that silence turned the room tight. She had been on night rounds 2 hours earlier and had noticed a sleeve brushing the pediatric doorway. Now she had the object in her hand that connected a stranger to that movement. Ava moved to the bedside table and opened the envelope, keeping her voice even. The sheet of paper inside showed a tiny photograph of a boy on a swing and a scribbled name that made Ava's fingers go cold, Lucas. Ava entered the corridor when she stepped out, holding the photograph carefully between 2 fingers. "I need you at Marcus Hale's room." Now, charge nurse Lucas came with his tablet, rubbing his knuckles where he always did when a shift felt wrong. He one quick, practical question. "Did you document it?" Ava handed him the bracelet and the paper and watched his face change from curiosity to concern. At the nurse station, Lucas tapped into Marcus's chart and scrolled without taking his eyes off the photo. "Ava, this could tie to a reopened missing child file. If that's the case, we have to alert administration and law enforcement." His tone contained both caution and protocol. He did not reach for the phone yet. Ava felt the first shift in her feelings. Suspicion moved into doubt as she wondered whether Marcus was hiding something innocent or dangerous. "Lucas, look at the name on the sticker. It matches nothing in the chart. Who would leave this in a hospital room?" Ava's hands trembled, but her voice stayed low. Lucas looked up and said, "We can't assume. But if it's linked to a case, anything we move now will matter." His words forced Ava to split her acting into 2 lanes. Nurse first, person second. Ava carried the items back toward Marcus's room because she could not leave them at the station. She wanted to hear his explanation before making an administrative decision. The corridor smelled of antiseptic and coffee. A cleaning cart squeaked past. Marcus stepped into the hallway before she reached the doorway and put a hand up in a quick motion of pleading. Ava, wait. Marcus, voice low and urgent. He crossed to block her path and his eyes landed on the photograph as if the paper itself had weight. Ava kept the photo between them and answered, Marcus, why did you hide this? He folded his hands tighter and said, I couldn't let anyone see it. Please, Ava, not yet. His plea moved her from doubt toward a new emotion, unease tightening into fear that someone else's safety might be at stake. They argued for a few breaths in the corridor where doctors' footsteps echoed. Ava kept her tone precise because she had patience down the hall depending on her clarity. Marcus, if this belongs to a child who was reported missing, there are legal steps. We can't decide this between us. Marcus's jaw worked. He stopped and said, You don't understand what would happen if that envelope leaves this hospital. I am asking you not to hand it over. His quick words were insistence, not explanation. Ava, Marcus, names and ids go where they belong. If you want my help, tell me the truth now. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. It was left with me the night I was admitted. I promised I'd keep it safe. I promised I'd bring it back. His hands trembled. Ava saw him clench and then release as though he had been holding some physical pressure inside his chest. Lucas called from the nurse station and asked, Ava, are you sure you want to open that here? If it's tied to an investigation, we need chain of custody. The practical reminder snapped Ava out of personal pressure. She put the photograph and bracelet into an evidence envelope temporarily and said, I'll follow protocol, Lucas. Wait here. Lucas nodded and added, I'll notify administration. But be careful, Ava. This could escalate quickly. His warning carried the weight of procedures she knew by heart. Alone in the staff locker room, Ava sat on a bench and held the envelope with both hands. The locker room was plain. Metal lockers, a clock above the sink, a strip of fluorescent light. She slit the envelope open with the nail of her thumb and laid the photograph on her knee, and a new emotion arrived. The photo made something shift from suspicion and fear into something colder. The calculation of consequences. The photograph showed a small boy, 6 or 7, wearing a red baseball cap and grinning at the camera from a playground. Someone had scrawled a full name on the back in blue ink. Ava read the name twice. The name matched a file Lucas had shown her a week earlier, a closed missing child report with a 20-year-old timestamp. The connections clicked into place, and Ava's fingers tightened on the paper. She carried the photograph back toward the station and past the supply room where a janitor gave a brief nod. The hospital felt busier in daylight. Conversations swirled in small pockets and the elevator chimed on the half-hour. Detective Ramirez arrived through the main doors while Ava was still on the corridor, and Lucas waved him in when he saw the expression on her face. Detective Ramirez moved with a measured gait. His badge at his belt caught the light, and he kept his voice even. Lucas, I hear you found evidence. Lucas handed him the envelope and said, This was recovered from Marcus Hale's room. Nurse Ava has the chain so far. Ramirez looked at the photograph and then at Marcus's chart on the tablet. I need to speak with Marcus now. The arrival of an investigator changed the corridor into an open room where many people could watch. Marcus sat upright in his bed when Ramirez entered the room. His face went pale under the warm lights. Ramirez opened with a precise question. Marcus Hale, where did you get this bracelet and photo? Marcus swallowed and said, I don't want trouble. I only wanted to keep it safe. Ramirez's presence pulled staff close. Even visitors stopped to look. Ava felt the second major emotion shift. Fear moved into panic when Ramirez mentioned reopening a case aloud. Marcus. Ramirez, voice firm. We are reopening a missing child inquiry based on new leads. You were linked to the name in a prior report. I need you to answer simple questions. Where were you 20 years ago? Marcus's hands folded so tight his knuckles went white. Detective Ramirez, please. I was here. Not here in this hospital, but I was... His sentence broke, and he laughed once in a way that made Ava step forward. The conversation sped into a rapid exchange. Ramirez, Marcus, your name is on an old report. We have reason to believe the child in this photo might be connected to that file. Marcus shot back. I told you, I kept the bracelet for a reason. Ramirez pressed. What reason, Marcus? Speak plainly. Marcus's replies rattled and became short. I don't want to ruin anyone. I promised. Ramirez again. Who did you promise, Marcus? The detective's insistence landed like a hammer. The back and forth accelerated. 3 quick questions from Ramirez, 3 short, evasive replies from Marcus, and then a plea. Please, Ava, don't hand it over. Ava watched Marcus's breathing change. His shoulders rose and fell more rapidly. Suddenly he clutched his chest and his face drained of color. He made a sharp sound and then slid down the side of the bed, collapsing to the floor. The room's air filled with immediate movement. Ramirez bent down to check his pulse, a nurse called for a crash cart, and Lucas shouted for security. The medical episode turned the interrogation into an emergency. Ava crouched and felt for Marcus's wrist. She could feel a thin, rapid pulse and his hand was damp with sweat. She ordered, "Ramirez, give me space. Move back and let me check his vitals." Ramirez obeyed in a single step. His face tightened, but he did not leave. The scene demanded a choice from Ava. Shield him under her care or step aside for law enforcement to secure him as a suspect. She started an emergency protocol she knew by reflex. Head tilt, airway check, call for oxygen. Her hands moved with training. She heard Ramirez say, "We need to secure evidence if he's conscious." Ava kept working and said aloud, "We stabilize first. Then we document." Marcus coughed and opened his eyes, looking at her as if he had been dragged somewhere he hadn't expected to be. Marcus whispered, "Ava, please." His voice was small and raw. Ava checked his pupils and felt the bracelet under his pillow press into the mattress as she adjusted the sheets. The detective reached toward the bedside table and paused, then asked, "Is he medically stable?" Lucas answered, "Stable for now, but he needs observation." Ramirez noted this and said, "We'll record everything once he's stable." Ava made a split-second decision and slid the photograph and bracelet into her scrub pocket beneath her cardigan while she still had the chance. She did not speak the choice aloud. She slid the objects, fingers steady. Ramirez glanced at her hands and then at Marcus, and his expression hardened into a question that Ava did not answer. The administrative machinery started. The hospital administrator arrived with a tablet, and a security guard closed off the hallway entrance. The administrator said, "We need to secure Ms. Hale's records and any physical evidence immediately. Who has custody of the items?" Lucas began to speak. Then Ava put a hand up and said, "I have them. I found them at his bedside." The administrator wrote a quick note and said, "We'll log that. But we must turn evidence over to the detective if it relates to a case." Ramirez added, "Chain of custody is required." Ava felt the room narrow into procedures and forms. She kept working the monitor and watching Marcus breathe. She felt a new shift inside her, protectiveness replacing panic. Protectiveness became action when she kept the photograph folded inside her pocket and slid the bracelet into a different compartment beneath her cardigan. She would do what was right for the patient in front of her, and that thought pushed her towards silence. Security for authorization to photograph the scene and for a clear list of witnesses. The administrator said, "Hospital policy says we document now and we hand items to law enforcement upon request." Ramirez, "I'll file a request for temporary custody of the items, but first we need a statement from the nurse." He looked at Ava and repeated, "Nurse Morales. Please describe how you found these items." Ava took a breath, steadied her voice, and recited the timeline from memory. Where she had walked during rounds, the sleeve near the doorway, the moment she found the bracelet. Her words were short and factual. Ramirez pointed question about whether she had opened the envelope. She answered, "Yes, I opened it in the locker room to verify the name." Ramirez noted that and said, "That could complicate evidence handling, but we will log it." Lucas stared and then said, "Ava, why didn't you bring this directly to security?" She looked at him and said, "I needed to hear Marcus. I thought he deserved that much before anyone else decided his fate." Lucas did not argue. Instead, he adjusted his expression and moved to help with bedside care. While staff finished stabilizing Marcus and security completed initial logs, Ava stepped out to the corridor and put the photograph back into the envelope. She moved to the pediatric doorway, the place where she had first noticed the sleeve brush by in the night, and felt the pull to return an object to the place it had been hidden. Her fingers closed around the hospital bracelet in her cardigan pocket, and she felt the thin metal against her palm. Ava did not hand the items to Ramirez when he came into the corridor to speak with her. Instead, he asked one more question. "Nurse Morales, are you withholding evidence?" Her answer was measured and precise. Detective Ramirez, I kept custody to ensure Mr. Hale received immediate care. I will hand anything over once his medical needs are resolved and proper documentation is complete. Ramirez studied her face and said, We will note that in the report. That exchange did not end the tension. Security Ava to sit for an official statement, and the administrator set a temporary seal on Marcus's file. Lucas placed a formal sticker on the envelope and asked Ava to initial it. She did, but she had already moved the photograph into a hidden pocket. The administrative seal made one kind of closure, and Ava felt another type of opening inside herself, the determination to find the fuller truth beyond the paperwork. As dusk moved the hospital lighting from bright white to warmer tungsten, the foot traffic thinned and the pediatric doorway settled into quiet. Ava returned there and set the bracelet on the windowsill where a gullible shaft of golden light picked out the worn stickers. She left the photograph folded and hidden in her pocket. The action felt like leaving an unfinished conversation in a room where other people might overhear later. Ava pressed her hand to the windowsill, feeling the cool paint under her palm, and made a small, private plan. She would pull Marcus's records later with Lucas's help, and she would look through old incident reports in the hospital archive during a late shift when fewer people watched. She would do it as a nurse and as the only person who had seen Marcus in that exact, fragile state. The plan was concrete and required steps. Log requests, obtain permission from administration, review archived files. She knew her choice had consequences. She also knew that Marcus's sudden collapse had changed how staff would treat him, and that Ramirez would be watching the chain of custody closely. The photograph in her pocket burned against her thigh like a coin. Ava moved away from the windowsill and walked the corridor once more to check on Marcus through the slightly ajar door. Medical staff had calmed him and a monitor beeped regular, soft notes. Marcus looked at her across the bed and mouthed a single word. Thank you. Ava met his gaze and said aloud, Marcus, we'll get through this step by step. Tell me what you can when you're ready. He swallowed and nodded, eyes wet around the edges, and then he closed them as if he had given up the energy to talk. Ava left the room with the bracelet's weight in her pocket and the photograph folded flat. Outside, Detective Ramirez stepped toward the administrator and Lucas, and they discussed next steps in low voices. Ramirez, we'll request a formal handover when we can secure it. For now, document everything and maintain custody logs. Lucas answered, we did that. Nurse Morels performed initial recovery. Ramirez glanced at Ava through the doorway, and his look contained a question about motives which he did not voice. Ava walked out beyond the lobby where visitors moved in small clusters, and the evening shuttle bus honked outside. She stopped beneath a fluorescent sign and put the photograph against the inside of her palm to confirm the boy's face one more time. The image made a new knot of questions. How long had Marcus carried this? Who had he promised? Ava's suspicion, doubt, fear, and protectiveness had shifted and braided through the afternoon until she could no longer pass which feeling was strongest. She folded the photograph and slid it beneath her watch band, a place she had sometimes used to hide a spare key. The action was deliberate and small. It bought her time, and it bought the photograph a new hiding place until she could follow the proper steps to verify the name against archives and police records without immediate pressure from Ramirez. Back in the corridor by the pediatric doorway, she set the bracelet on the sill and stepped back into the shadow of the doorway, watching the bracelet catch the low light. She left the corridor light on and walked away slowly, her shoes making soft taps on the linoleum. As she moved away, she heard a distant security radio call and the echo of Ramirez's voice giving instructions to his team. Ava did not speak to anyone as she walked the rest of her shift. She moved from bedside to bedside and let the routine tasks keep her hands busy so her mind could turn over the new facts. She would follow protocol tomorrow and run official checks with Lucas's permission. Tonight, she would sleep and prepare the steps she needed. The photograph in her pocket felt heavier than it had that morning. It had become a lever she might use to pry a closed case open. Before she left at the end of the shift, Ava paused by the pediatric doorway one more time. The bracelet lay where she had placed it, small and ordinary in the pool of light. She thought of the boy on the swing and of Marcus's sudden collapse, and she felt two things clearly. She was responsible for the patient in front of her right now, and she had begun a search that could change more than one life. She walked out of the corridor with the photograph concealed and a list of practical steps already forming in her head. Her final action in the hospital that night was simple and concrete. She switched off the fluorescent in the small supply closet because she knew she would use that room later to photocopy old files in privacy. She locked the door to her locker, placed the bracelet on the windowsill where she could check on it in the morning, and walked out into the night with the photograph folded against her chest. Behind her, the hospital corridor remained lit, and the pediatric doorway kept the small, unfinished question where others would find it. Ava's last thought as she stepped onto the quiet sidewalk was not a speech or a promise, but a plan of steps. Request archived files, speak with Lucas after morning shift, check the closed missing child report she remembered, and watch Ramirez's movements. She knew these were practical moves, and she trusted procedure more than rhetoric. She kept moving until the hospital doors hissed closed behind her and the city swallowed the steps she took toward the next shift. Ava snatched the edge of the envelope the moment the medtech's footsteps passed the doorway. Suspicion tightened her jaw. She had seen that motion before. Her fingers closed on cold paper under the pillow, and she felt the thin bend of metal through the paper. "What are you hiding, Marcus?" she said, voice low and sharp. The corridor smelled of disinfectant and instant coffee. The sound of distant monitors filled the space between them. Ava's suspicion drove every step she took that night. She remembered pulling the faded hospital bracelet from under a pillow 2 nights earlier and watching Marcus close his cardigan as if the metal did not belong to him. She had told herself then that she would not let a quiet shift swallow anything wrong. She kept her hand on the envelope and kept her eyes on Marcus until the med tech turned the corner and the fluorescent lights hummed softer. "Marcus, put your hand where I can see it, Ava." His name because using it kept the distance measured. Marcus held out his hands slowly, fingers still trembling. He did not ask for help. He did not call for a nurse. He folded his hands as if he could hold in whatever was coming out. "Ava? Marcus?" Too low for anyone else in the hallway to hear. His voice carried shame in a way that made Ava's breath pick up. "It's not what you think." He reached for the envelope with 2 fingers, then stopped when she tightened her grip. Ava could feel the first emotion shift, suspicion leaning into doubt. She dragged the envelope to the nurse's station and set it on the counter under the desk lamp. Her hands did not shake. She had a list of hospital rules in her head and a longer list of instincts. She slid the flap open with the tip of a pen. Inside was a neonatal chart printed on thin paper and a small, worn hospital bracelet with a faded name. The chart had handwriting in the margins and a stamp from years ago. Marcus watched her read. He did not look away. "This matches a missing file, Ava," and the words landed hard. She did not phrase it as accusation. She let the document speak. Ravi Patel, rounding with a clipboard, blocked the path to the chart room and asked, "What's that?" Before Ava could think of an evasive answer, the second emotion shift arrived, doubt flipping into fear. The fear was businesslike, the kind that named consequences. "Patel, this should be in records for the neonatal audit, Ava." She kept her voice steady. She kept her eyes on Marcus as she spoke his name. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Marcus, why were you hiding it?" Marcus ran a thumb over the faded bracelet while his eyes dropped to the floor. "I found it in a box I was going through," he said. "I shouldn't have brought it here." His syllables were short. The sentence sounded like someone trying to close a door after the keys fell out. Janice Reed, the charge nurse, pushed a coffee mug into Ava's hand and read the chart over her shoulder. Lina Carter, the patient advocate, had a photocopy of another file and showed it with the blunt, practical movement of someone used to paperwork rewriting people's lives. This name here, Lina, tapping the photocopy with a nail. It's part of the unresolved case from 2015. "We never closed it." Lena's voice had the flat, steady cadence of someone who had decided to make noise about things others wanted quiet. Ava's fingers tightened on the mug. She watched Marcus as Janice and Lena moved the conversation toward the records room. "We need to check originals. Janice, if this is the missing chart, we have to follow procedure." Her command put the hospital machinery into motion. Marcus stepped back. He looked at the doorway to the floor, Then at the packed cart of charts, "I can't have this go into a file," he said. "You don't understand what it means. If they put my name to it." He did not finish the sentence. His silence did the rest. He feared exposure in a way that suggested personal consequence beyond an audit. Ava's next choice came from the intersection of oath and human response. She thought of the tiny silver locket she kept under her scrubs and of the patient she had lost years ago who made her promise to always look closely. She imagined the baby footprints stamped on that old chart and how a wrong signature could close a life. She felt a pull toward professional duty and a different pull toward the man in front of her who had carried the bracelet to a locked bedside. Marcus. Names get attached to charts. People get tracked by signatures. You know that, Ava? She watched him flinch. "If you know something, tell me. Help me understand," his name again to keep the conversation anchored. Marcus swallowed and let out a small, involuntary exhale. "I don't want to destroy anyone." "Not again," he said, his hands folded tight where patrons of guilt curl their fingers. "I was responsible once. I was young and in charge of a shift with one too many decisions. The chart, it ties me to a choice that cost a life." He did not raise his voice. The next moment of the story arrived, a revealed motive that changed the stakes. Ava reacted physically. She took a step toward him and then stopped, palms flat on the counter. She kept to short questions. "Which chart, which baby? Tell me the name on the bracelet." Her delivery was direct. She needed concrete facts. Marcus looked at the bracelet and said, "Evelyn Ortiz," his mouth closed around the name like someone who had swallowed gravel. "She was listed with that bracelet in 2015. I signed off on a transfer that night. The baby didn't make it. I thought the signature was right. I thought the handover was done correctly." His eyes found Ava's. "Ava, I need you to know I'm trying to fix what I can." The rhythm of his speech had a different cadence now, pleading, not defensive. Ava felt shame and anger collide in her chest. She had seen Marcus's steady hands hold other lives. She had seen him read charts with the same focus that nurses used when they wanted to protect. She also had the hospital's rules on her tongue. Her next action was to redirect the situation toward procedure. "Marcus, come with me to records. Patel is calling the clerk." She named them both so the choices would not dissolve into private bargaining. They moved down the hall. Monitors clicked. The custodial cart squealed past. Marcus walked with a measured gait that tried to match his usual reserve. Janice followed with an envelope in her hand that had a stamp reading "Archived." Lena walked behind them carrying photocopies. The corridor narrowed and the early morning light thinly sliced the window slats. At the records room door, an alarmed clerk looked up. "We are missing charts from that audit," she said. Her name tag read Sonia. She had a file cabinet key on a chain and a wary way of holding paper. "If that's the original chart, we need to log it now." Her voice was procedural and unreadable. The registrar's rhythm always made consequences feel official. Marcus pushed the door open. The room smelled of paper and toner. Rows of metal cabinets glinted under fluorescent strips. Marcus pulled the envelope from his cardigan and set it on the desk. He kept his hands visible. He did not look at Sonia. He did not look at Jutta Patel, who had followed and was standing with his clipboard folded against his chest. Marcus tore the flap. The page inside had an original stamp and a handwritten note in the margin that said, "Transfer authorized." The signature looked like a name he had not wanted to see again. Marcus's face changed. His jaw worked. The next external event occurred. The chart's contents forced a confession. "I signed it." Marcus into the cramped room. "I signed that transfer. The baby was transferred and then coded. I took responsibility because the transfer went through on my watch." He exhaled as if he had been holding the word for days. His confession shifted the atmosphere from suspicion to confrontation. Jutta Patel's brow folded. "Marcus, a signature is a legal action. You understand that?" He the name like a lever pulling the whole institution forward. "We will need to record this. Security will want a statement." His voice was clipped in the way doctors make statements when they have to both care and protect the hospital. Janice set her mug down with a small thud and asked, "Marcus, did you tell anyone back then? Did you file an incident report?" Her practical questions landed like small hammers. Marcus's hands tightened. "No, Marcus, I filed nothing. I thought the notes were clear. I thought I had followed the chain. I thought. He stopped because the records clerk shook her head, and because there was no graceful finish to that sentence. Ava stepped in. Marcus, Lena Carter has a photocopy with a name that ties to the audit. Sonia, will you check the registry's log for signatures from 2015? Her words mobilized the room. Lena handed the photocopy to Sonia. Sonia lifted the paper and typed into a terminal with quick, precise fingers. The screen blinked and then printed a line of matching signatures. Marcus stared at the monitor as if it might rewrite his story. Janice, this complicates things. If your signature is on the original Marcus, we have to notify patient relations and open a file. The practical language made the situation concrete. Legal steps forms witnesses. Marcus moved toward the door. I need to leave, he said. I can't sit through another system deciding my life. He took 2 steps, then stopped when Ava put a hand on his arm. The grasp was light but firm. Marcus, you are a patient here. We do not allow sign-outs until a physician clears you. Ava. She used the hospital's rules to structure the moment. It kept her from making the choice in a vacuum. Janice, will you watch the entrance? She's name again a tether. Janice crossed her arms and planted herself near the doorway. You are not leaving the floor, Marcus. Not until we know more. Her voice was steady. She intended to block him physically and legally. Marcus looked between them. Ava, please, he said, if this goes to administration, they will call for hearings, for records, for people to testify. There are names on that chart that will be dragged back into light. I can't put them through that. I can't let a file destroy more lives. His hands shook now. The emotion shifted from fear to pleading. Ava saw the moral knot tighten. She also saw how Janice's resolve and Drut Patel's clipped legal talk would push toward institutional escalation. She had choices. Hand the chart to administration and follow procedure, or protect Marcus and risk covering a wrong. The next external event arrived. An alarm buzzed at the records room door as security entered the hallway. Gonzalez, the hospital security officer, walked in with measured steps. We got an alert about an unauthorized chart movement. Gonzalez. He scanned the room and then looked at Marcus. His presence made the consequences real. We need to inventory what is here and who touched it. He put a small handheld scanner on the desk and set it blinking. Marcus's face dropped. Ever. He said, voice raw, you have to decide. Help me hand this over or help me hide it. I can't face all of them. The request was simple and terrible. Marcus had moved from denial to confession to asking for protection. The chapter's mini cliffhanger came now. Ava had to choose under pressure. Ava swallowed. Her palms were slightly damp. She thought of the patient who had died years ago and of the promise she kept in that quiet moment to always look closely. She thought of the records and signatures and of the legal reality Gonzalez represented. She also thought of Marcus's small, involuntary exhale when he was relieved. She felt a new emotion rise, a steadied protectiveness that came from seeing a person break. Marcus, I will photocopy the original and give the copy to Dre Patel and Sonia now. Ava. Her voice was measured. She kept her hand on the document but slid the photocopy tray toward herself. Then we log everything in the audit. I will not let you leave until the physician clears you, but I will make sure the audit includes context, not just a name. Her words aimed to bind 2 opposing needs. Duty and mercy. Janice nodded once and stepped back from the door. Drut Patel tapped a line in his tablet. We will record statements. We will open the file to patient relations. Marcus, you will have to explain your role. We cannot promise the outcome. He spoke the facts. The legal machinery started to turn. Lina handed over a sheet with contact information for Evelyn Ortiz's next of kin and a photocopy of a previous complaint that had been archived. You should know this existed. Lina, someone raised questions then. It might change how the audit proceeds. The unexpected ally shifted the power of the moment. Lina's paper introduced a new clue that connected Marcus to a longer pattern. Sonia pushed over a small stack of signed log sheets. These show who accessed the files in that year, she said. She tapped a name that did not match Marcus's. This one shows Drutta Harrow signed off on transfers that month. The twist arrived. The signature on the chart matched Marcus, but other official logs pointed to someone else carrying out the transfer. The new information changed how the group understood responsibility. Ava read the lines and felt the scene tilt. Marcus's tight hands loosened a fraction, so I might not be the whole story, he said, voice smaller. But my name is on the paper I signed. I can't pretend that doesn't mean something. He did not look at Sonia. He looked at Ava. The records room turned into a place where accountability was measured in printed ink and the angle of a signature. Dr. Patel motioned for Gonzalez to record who was present. Sonia typed names. Janice filled a new incident form. Lena set the photocopies into a labeled folder and slid it across to Ava. Ava held the sheet. She looked at the faded bracelet sitting on top of the original. She thought of the baby foot stamped in the corner of the chart and of Marcus's small leather bracelet and silver band. She felt the final emotion rise. A strange steadiness that would become a decision. She no longer wanted to be only a recorder of facts. She wanted to keep a line between procedure and the human damage that paperwork could magnify. Ava, Marcus, quietly, please. Decide. His voice was not loud. It held an urgency that asked for human judgment rather than bureaucracy. She made a choice that was specific and concrete. She pulled the photocopier closer, fed the original in, and let the machine print a clean copy. She gave the copy to Dr. Patel and to Sonia. Then she kept one copy folded into her pocket and stepped out of the records room. Outside, the sun had started to find the staff lounge window. Ava walked there with a photocopy in her hand and a silence behind her that thrummed with unresolved consequences. She sat in a chair by the window and smoothed the paper. The light warmed the ink. She saw the name Evelyn Ortiz in block letters and a date. She felt exposed and oddly steady. A knock came at the door. Janice stepped in and sat across from Ava without saying a word. Marcus's steps approached quietly. He stopped at the threshold and looked at the folded copy in Ava's hand. What are you going to do, Marcus? Ava folded the photocopy and slipped it into her pocket. I'll log everything we found, Marcus. I'll make sure the audit shows context and the chain of custody. I won't let the file read like only your fault without evidence. But I will not hide things that must be seen either. His name to anchor the decision. Marcus exhaled a small sound of relief and of fear. He stepped closer and put his hand on the back of the chair as if steadying himself. Thank you, he said. I don't know what else to say. He used short words. He had no petition left. Janice cleared her throat. We will have to bring patient relations and legal into this. Be prepared. She named the next steps because hospitals move in named actions. Ava nodded. She felt the chapter close in a small, concrete way. Decisions logged, copies made, and the morning's light marking the end of that night shift. She kept one folded copy in her pocket and a silent agreement with Marcus that neither of them would let the chart dictate everything without corroboration. They left the lounge together. The records room's locked door clicked behind them and the photocopy lay warm in Ava's pocket, touching the silver of her locket. The chapter ended with that hinge, a documented copy, an official log to follow, and a quiet decision that bound Ava and Marcus into keeping a shared truth between them. A knock at the records room door sounded just as they stepped into the corridor, and Dr. Patel called their names for the next action to begin. Ava grabbed Marcus's wrist as MedTech Ryan reached for the thin envelope, the metal of the bracelet cold against her palm. Suspicion tightened her voice. Ryan, stop. Leave those here. Ryan froze with his hand half-way to his pocket. Marcus's fingers curled around the folded paper, the hospital bracelet slipping at the crease. The corridor smelled of antiseptic and warm coffee from the nurse station. Ava did not let herself think. She acted from the pattern she had learned in the last 3 nights. Edge of fabric, flash of metal, the envelope that did not belong in a pocket. The immediate problem was simple and concrete. Who had placed a child's discharge photocopy and a faded bracelet with Marcus, and why had the chart slot been tampered with? Those facts sat between them like blunt instruments. Marcus, Ava, keeping her voice low so it did not scatter through the EQ. Open your hand. Marcus's jaw worked. He let his fingers part. The bracelet lay folded twice, its plastic tag cracked. The envelope's flap had been slit and rehung. His eyes tracked Ava through the pale light, blue, green pupils fixed and cautious. He had been defensive since she first caught him at the pediatric doorway. But this time there were nurses watching, and an administrative shadow they could not ignore. Head nurse Carmen appeared at the nurse station edge, hair pulled back, tablet in hand. She took 1 step forward and 1 step back, measuring. Ava, what's happening? She asked. Ava looked at Carmen, then at Marcus. Her suspicion hardened into an accusation she did not soften. Marcus, this belongs to a discharged child. Why is it in your cardigan? Marcus pressed his lips together. He kept his hands folded as if holding something fragile. He stopped, swallowed. He did not raise his voice. The room held a thin tension, as if everyone waited to see whether he would break or hold. Carmen stepped entirely forward. Marcus explained now. The accusation pushed Marcus back into a defense he had prepared. His voice stayed low. It's mine to keep, Carmen. I found it years ago. Ava's suspicion shifted once more, now edged with anger. She had found the bracelet under the pillow 2 nights earlier and pulled it free with her fingers. She had watched Marcus blink as if surprised and saw the awkward tucking of the cardigan then. That memory made her palms go slightly clammy. She forced herself to ask the next question. Found it where, on which day? Marcus hesitated. Carmen glanced at the corridor doorway, then at the chart board. Marcus, which patient was discharged? She demanded. He met Carmen's eyes and said a single name, Liam Ortiz. Ava felt a second shift, anger receding into a cold focus. Liam Ortiz was the pediatric case that had closed 2 years ago, a discharge that had landed in a pile of archived forms. The hospital file had been moved to a closed slot, and Jutta Patel had signed the paperwork. If Marcus's claim tied him to that child, the stakes moved off paperwork and onto people. Carmen's mouth thinned. There is no Liam Ortiz in current records. Then we check the archives, Ava. Her voice carried orders that felt like tools. She grabbed the envelope and the bracelet by the edges. The bracelet had a name tag with a number punched out long ago. The photocopy inside showed a discharge summary with a handwritten note in a doctor's scrawl, an initial and a date. They walked fast to the records alcove, Carmen ahead with her tablet unlocked. The alcove smelled of dust and toner. Ava kept one hand on the envelope as if it might vanish. She had learned to move when something might slip away. Moving was how she kept control. At the slot for pediatric discharges, a thin space gaped where a file should have rested. The bracket had been nudged. The paper edges around it showed a smear where fingers had dragged. Ava's breath shortened. The log entry for that slot was missing. She touched the metal edge of the file holder and felt the nick where someone had forced the paper out. That's tampered, Carmen. She tapped the tablet. Dre. Patel, can you come here? Dr. Patel appeared from the corridor with quick strides, his face composed. He looked at the gap, then at Marcus. What is this? He asked. Marcus swallowed. He had folded himself small, as if the words could be kept inside his chest. I kept the bracelet, he said, voice scraped. I wanted to know. No, Ava interrupted. You kept it because you thought you could protect someone. You hid the record. Marcus flinched at her certainty. He had not expected her to name his motive so simply. His next emotion was visible. Guilt broke into determination. I didn't hide it from the hospital, he said. I hid it from him. Carmen blinked. From who? Marcus. He looked at the photocopy in Ava's hand. After a beat, he spoke the next twist. From Liam's father. The alcove felt smaller. Ava's suspicion shifted again, this time toward pity threaded with alarm. If Liam had a father searching, if records had been removed, then the danger was not bureaucratic. It involved a living person who might be harmed by exposure. We need specifics, Jutta Patel. Marcus, give us dates, names. Marcus ran a hand through his short dark hair. He kept his eyes on the photocopy. Liam Ortiz was discharged in 2020 to July 23rd. The note says temporary foster to an uncle. The paperwork was stamped and then moved. I volunteered to be near his case on nights because I owed someone. Ava's hands clenched the envelope. The shift from suspicion to a complicated pity made her chest tighten in a practical way. She checked the med tech log, the discharge signature, the patient watcher's roster. Each check moved like a lever. Who did you owe? She asked. Marcus took another breath. The guilt in him changed tone. Shame softened into a plain, pragmatic will to explain. His nurse was my old friend. He named her. Elena. She left the service after the case closed. She would keep an eye. At that, another event punctured the room. Social worker Elena stepped through the records alcove doorway, hair in a loose bun, a folder clutched to her chest. She had been in the hospital admin offices. Carmen had called for her. Ava watched Elena's face go blank, then narrow, reading the photocopy. Elena's fingers trembled when she took the paper. Elena, Ava. Tell us what happened. Elena looked at Marcus, then at the photocopy. Her voice was steady but tight. Liam Ortiz's situation was volatile. The family had disputes. The child was placed briefly with an uncle who later withdrew. We closed the case because the county had a new guardian arrangement. Carmen frowned. Why is there a missing log entry? Elena folded the corners of the photocopy. Someone removed the file after hours, she said. I noticed the removal on the audit trail. It shows an override from an internal terminal with credentials that should only be used by administration. Dra. Patel's eyes flicked to Ava. We must assume a deliberate concealment. That external note, audit tampering, forced another shift in Ava. From procedural focus into urgency. Protocol required documented reporting, but protocol could expose Liam if the wrong hand saw the name. Ava felt the divide between official procedure and human risk as physical choices. File the incident or shield a vulnerable person. Her voice narrowed. If we log this publicly, Liam's guardian or anyone who searches the file will find the paper trail. If Liam or his new guardian are in danger, we must act differently. Carmen's mouth tightened. Ava, we can't alter records. You can secure copies, Elena. We can document with witnesses, then move to protect the child through social work channels. Marcus's expression begged for a path that did not end in criticism. The guilt in him softened into relief that someone suggested a plan. Ava watched the micro-movement. His hands unclench, a small exhale. That was an emotion shift, shame to relief, made visible by his posture. They agreed on a cautious course. Ava would photocopy the discharge summary and the bracelet tag. Elena would witness the copy and create a sealed social work packet. Carmen would note the tampering on her tablet without entering identifying details. Dra. Patel would be the administrative signatory. They would not publish names on the usual audit trail. Before any action, however, the room forced a confrontation that consumed the air. Carmen stepped close to Marcus and said, If you did this to hide someone, you could be accused of interfering with records. Marcus looked at her. He did not deny it. I can take that, he said quietly. But I won't risk them. Ava watched him and felt the last shift of the chapter. Her suspicion resolving into a protective alignment with Marcus. She still had questions how deep his involvement was, who else knew, but the immediate moral line was clear. The patient named in the record might be vulnerable, and the hospital staff had a duty to keep that child safe. They carried the photocopy to a private consultation room near the ECU. White blinds blocked the rising sun. Ava placed the bracelet and the envelope on the table. Marcus sat opposite, cardigan folded over his knees. Elena took out a witness form and slid it across. Ava's hand stayed steady as she made copies. The act of copying felt like a promise of care, tangible, not rhetorical. Each printed page spat out, warm from the machine, the typed entries sharp and final. Elena signed, Carmen initialed on a witness line, and Jurta Patel noted an internal reference number that would not be searchable by the general audit. Why did you keep the bracelet? Ava finally. Her question was not a demand for punishment. It was a need to understand motive so she could judge what risk remained. Marcus set his jaw, because it was the only link to him. His voice tightened. When Liam disappeared from the roster, I thought maybe someone would look. I thought I could keep his name from being used against him. Ava leaned forward. Used against him how? Marcus's next words contained the twist that changed their understanding of earlier events. His father contested the guardianship. He has an attorney who likes official records. If Liam's name or placement shows up in a public search, the father could take steps that would expose the child's location. Ava listened to the plainness of the sentence. No metaphors, no abstractions, a factual cause and effect. Record exposure could trigger legal action, and legal action could reveal a child's placement. That clarity forced a decision. We file copies with social work and seal them. Elena, we document the tampering in a way that preserves chain of custody, but doesn't list the child's location. Ava's hands moved as she spoke. She returned the bracelet to Marcus for a moment, and watched him hold it like a small, heavy truth. He extended it toward her. I'm sorry, he said. She studied his face, square jaw, early gray at the temple, a crease on the left cheek. She saw the small, involuntary exhale he gave when he felt relieved. She recognized his need to atone through action rather than words. Ava reached out and took the bracelet back. She lifted it and then placed it on the table next to the sealed photocopy packet. Actions matter more than apologies, she said. If you wanted to protect someone, tell us what you can now. Marcus nodded and began to speak in short, factual sentences. He gave names, dates, and an account of how he had first seen the bracelet under the pillow on a night shift. He described a nurse who had later trusted him to keep an eye on the case. He named Elena and explained she had asked him to watch for anyone asking questions. He had kept the bracelet because he could not prove the new guardian's identity without setting off alarms. Ava clarifying questions. Who had authority to override logs, who had the credentials used in the audit trail, and what pattern of searches would flag a public record. Elena answered with the precise social work steps she would take. Carmen described the administrative constraints. Patel agreed to put a non-public flag on the physical file, so only certain terminals could see identifying entries. Their discussion was interrupted by a sharp knock. The door opened and Med Tech Ryan stepped in, eyes wide. "There's a woman at the bedside," he said. "She says she's Liam's aunt and she has a court letter." The knock created a mini cliffhanger, an external surprise after several procedural moves. Everyone in the room leaned forward. Ava's heart went into a quick, practical rhythm. Verify, protect, confirm. Carmen rose immediately. "On no public record until we verify," she ordered. "Bring her to the nurse station, not the EQ." Ava followed Carmen out with Elena and Marcus close behind. In the corridor, the fluorescent lights hummed. The woman at the bedside wore a faded sweater and held an official-looking letter. Her face was plain and tired. Her name Rosa Calderon, and spoke slowly. "I'm Liam's aunt. I have papers from family court." Ava for the document and read the header. The letter showed a court date, a case number, and a signature. It also included redacted contact information. The signature matched a county clerk's stamp, but the body of the document used a different guardian's name than the photocopy in Ava's hand. This revelation changed the shape of events, a competing claim that might itself be a risk. If Rosa truly was an aunt with legitimate papers, transparency would protect the child. If her claim was false, exposure would endanger the child. Ava felt urgency bloom into controlled decisiveness. "Elena, confirm the case number." "Ava, Carmen, secure the letter and keep the woman here while we verify." Elena moved with precise steps, calling her office and writing the case number to be checked through county channels. Marcus stood near the nurse station edge, hands folded, watching the woman with guarded attention. He had shifted again, his earlier shame giving way to a protective presence. Within minutes, Elena returned. The case number was valid, but the guardian listed on the court letter did not match the name on the discharge photocopy. The county record showed a confidential placement directive that kept the child's current address sealed from public release. Ava looked at Marcus, then at Rosa. "If you are family," she said to Rosa, "we will need a proper verification without revealing the child's location. The hospital cannot release the child into uncertain custody." Rosa's voice broke on the word family. "I have the papers," she said. "They need to come here." Elena placed a hand on Rosa's folded document and then on the sealed photocopy in Ava's hands. "We will verify and we will protect the child's location," she said. "We will also review the tampered slot and the audit override." The final, decisive confrontation came at the record's alcove doorway. Justa Patel and Carmen stood with Marcus and Elena as Ava described the plan. Photocopies secured, a non-public flag on the file, social work packet created, and verification of the court document before any transfer of custody. Marcus agreed to turn over any additional information he had. "I'll tell you everything I know about the father's lawyer, where they asked to check records, and the times someone came to ask questions." Carmen nodded. "We will also report the tampering to internal compliance, but we will not enter identifying details in the public audit." Juta Patel added the clinical authority. "I'll sign the sealed packet and be the administrative witness. We will record chain of custody and restrict terminal access." After the meeting, the morning light slanted across the EQ window. Ava and Marcus sat by the alcove window where sunlight pooled on the sill. Marcus held the bracelet between his fingers and then pushed it across the table toward her. "For keeping," he said. Ava took it and placed it in the already sealed packet. The physicality of the gesture mattered. No speeches, no proclamations, an exchange of responsibility. They walked back to the bedside in silence. The child's bed was empty now. The folded gown lay on a chair where someone had set it down earlier. Ava filed the sealed photocopy into the packet with Elena watching and Carmen initialing a witness page. The packet was labeled with an internal reference and kept in a locked cabinet accessible only to social work and Jutta Patel. Ava felt the final shift settle. Urgency turned into guarded hope. It was not a romantic sunrise or a sweeping redemption. It was paperwork, witness signatures, and a chair with sunlight on a folded gown. Those concrete things meant safety measures put in place. Before leaving, Marcus stood and met Ava's eyes. "Thank you," he said in a way that was not entirely apology and not entirely a request. Ava answered with a small, exact sentence. "We did what we could." Later that morning, after Alina confirmed the court verification through county channels and Carmen logged the tampering as an internal security incident, Ava signed the final witness line. She put the photocopy packet into an evidence envelope and slid it under the lock with Jutta Patel's key. She left the folded gown on the empty chair by the window, where the sunlight warmed the fabric. Ava walked out of the records alcove with a clear set of steps to follow. Monitor access logs, insist on sealed transfers, and work with social work to keep Liam's details confidential. She had not resolved every question about Marcus's choices, or the motives of the person who overrode the audit. Those investigations would continue. But the immediate danger, public exposure of a child's placement, had been mitigated. As she left the hospital corridor, Ava set the envelope on the nurse station counter and took a steadying breath. Her suspicion had driven her to act. It had led to accusation, then to doubt, then to clarity and a protective plan. That emotional path had changed her decisions in the room. She chose secrecy in service of safety, not secrecy for concealment. The final concrete beat came when Patel Marcus to remain available for compliance interviews and Carmen arranged for a controlled meeting with county social services. Marcus agreed. He stayed until Alina confirmed the child's current caseworker would handle the transition privately. Ava returned to the ICU window where morning pooled over the chairs. She looked at the empty bed and the folded gown and felt a small, practical relief, the kind that comes from resolved tasks, not from grand conclusions. She had stepped between a med tech and a paper, and that single action had set a course. Copies made, witnesses signed, a sealed packet filed, and a plan to protect a vulnerable child. The day's work would ripple out, audits, interviews, possibly legal questions, but for now the tangible items sat in a drawer under lock and signature. Marcus left later with a quiet nod to Elena and Carmen. He touched Ava's wrist once, a brief pressure of thanks, then walked out into the sunlight, shoulders squared in a way that suggested he had accepted the consequences he sought. Ava watched him go and then turned to her own tasks, medication checks, chart updates, and the steady work of shifts. The decision she had made, protecting a named child through sealed documentation and witness signatures, was concrete and accountable. She filed the copied records with a witness, set the folded gown on the empty chair by the window, and stepped back into the flow of the hospital with a plan to follow up. The chapter closed on a small, visible action. The envelope, stamped and witnessed, sliding into the locked cabinet with Jutta Patel's key turning once. No grand speech, no sweeping promises, only a precise, documented choice that pushed the secret forward under guard and a quiet agreement between two people who had shared it.